It's delicious. What I'm tasting in that coffee is sweetness, chocolate, caramel. It's a little bit nutty. That's what I'm identifying. And what I'm doing is really a trained skill. It's all derived from my experience and from my using something called the coffee flavor wheel. By the end of this episode, you'll understand the coffee flavor wheel, what it is, and how to use it so that you can talk about coffee and understand it in a much more informed way. I'm Major Cohen. Welcome to the Cold Brew Lab. We've covered a lot so far. We've looked at origin, nitro, cold brew, and today we're going to take a deeper dive into how professionals actually talk about coffee and how Cumulus has used that framework to design every aspect of the cold coffee experience. So most professional coffee tasters don't taste by instinct alone. Of course, they taste an incredible amount of coffee because that experience allows them to understand so many different nuances. But they use the coffee flavor wheel. It's a wheel that has over 100 descriptors and 9 categories. And what it provides is a shared language for coffee. What's interesting is that most coffee drinkers, not only have they never seen it, but without a little help, they would not understand how to use it. And today we're going to help you know what it looks like and how to use it. After you understand the wheel, what's in it, and how you might use it, we're going to explain the wheel played a unique part in Cumulus, not only in the way that we discovered and selected the coffees, but also in the look and feel of everything that we do for Cumulus Coffee. First, let's talk about the wheel. When you look at the wheel, you can see that it has some structure. There's outer rings, there's an inner ring, and the way to understand it is that the inner ring are some of the more simple attributes that you might assign to a coffee. And as you move to the outside, those attributes are more complex. Now, what we think of when we think of the attributes, there are 9 that are really primary. Fruity, floral, sweet, nutty, spices, roasted, green, fermented, and other. You've seen those words used to describe coffee. Now you're actually beginning to see that they come from someplace based on thousands of professional experiences tasting coffee. First, let me take a sip of the coffee. Now let's think through the wheel to talk about ritual medium roast. I described it as sweet and nutty, chocolate, and so now look at the wheel and see that if I use that initial description on the core attributes, you can find sweet and nutty, and you can see them in the upper left of the center of the wheel. Now move up and a little bit to the left, and you'll notice that cocoa and chocolate, hazelnut, and some other kinds of nuts are also listed in that upper left-hand corner. It's simple. I started in the middle and I moved through the area in the wheel where there were words, and what I did was I decided, is that wheel word relevant for this coffee that I'm tasting? And if it were, then I know that I'm on the right path to developing a description and understanding the coffee better. You can think about any coffee that you've ever had, and I'm going to tell you that it's relevant to the wheel and the words used to describe it. There isn't any coffee in the world that isn't covered flavor-wise, attribute-wise, that isn't on the wheel. Think for one moment how many times you've entered a place where a few dozen coffees were described and you see all the words and you wonder to yourself, what do those words mean? Where do they come from? And how do I use those to make a decision for my own coffee? And if you take that one step further, you know those attributes that you like, and I'm quite sure that you understand those that you don't. Using the wheel, you can begin to identify where those are and understand what you might want and what you might want to avoid. And remember what we've been talking about. You can tie those flavor attributes that come from the wheel back to the origin that the coffee came from, because all of those descriptors are coming not from made-up descriptors. They're coming from the impact of where the coffee came from, the way that it was processed, everything we've been talking about in the Cold Brew Lab. This exact process is the approach that we've taken to coffee at Cumulus through the whole lineup. We use the wheel kind of 2 ways. First of all, there's a target. I'll use ritual as an example. When I talked about ritual, I talked about we wanted that mainstream coffee, generally loved. And so what we did was we looked at origins, Brazil, Colombia, Guatemala, and then we knew that for a coffee that was going to sit nicely in the middle, we wanted to find coffees that were in that part of the chart. We knew where we went would give us those coffees, so we had a target. And then we used the chart as we tasted the coffees we selected to basically nail down, to validate that we were hitting the target. We have a coffee at Cumulus that we bring out periodically in the year called Gilded. With Gilded, we don't necessarily have the same target. What we have with Gilded is a target to find the most unusual coffee in the world. And then when we get those coffees to sample, we sample them and we describe them using the wheel. We taste the coffee, maybe we've never had it before, and we find where it is on that center core of the wheel, and then we begin to attribute things that the coffee's bringing us to the experience that we're having, and then we make a decision. Is this coffee what we're looking for with a Cumulus Gilded? And if you've ever tasted our Gilded, you know that we hit the target every time. This approach of targeting or understanding using the wheel is one that we use at Cumulus for every product that we have. It's what gives Cumulus such an incredibly well-rounded, diverse portfolio of coffees to bring to you when you're having a cold coffee experience. I want to think about a word with you all, and the word is intentionality. The flavor wheel didn't just shape the way we approached all of the flavors in all of the Cumulus coffees. It actually informed everything about the way we look and the way we come to the world in our website, in our packaging. And the reason we did that is we have a respect for the craft that goes beyond just making something beautiful. We took something that existed in the world of coffee, the flavor wheel, and we were among the first to use all of those intentional colors to inform everything about the way that our product looks wherever it shows up. Look at the ritual. This is a beautiful array of colors. Now, we did something really unique. We collaborated with a local artist in the New York area, Joe Henry Baker, and we asked him to create a series of watercolors inspired by our understanding and respect for the craft and translating that into a visualization of all that we've talked about. The origin, soon to come the roast, and the way the coffee appears in the flavor wheel. So in case there's any confusion, I want to go back one more time and perhaps provide you with a tip that I've used for years when I've introduced the wheel to people to try to use for just what we've been talking about. What I always suggested was that they take a moment and sip the coffee, and perhaps for the first time, stop and really think about the coffee. Try not to be distracted, if you will, so that they can begin to think about what am I actually tasting. Now, the wheel becomes the first tool because you go to the wheel with that experience and you look for that core attribute. Once you identify the core attribute, I'm going to suggest if you have the wheel printed or even with your hands, take your hands and cover up every part of the wheel except that one segment that relates to the attribute you just found. Because I found with the wheel, it's easier to eliminate almost all of it and leave yourself a segment where you can go and explore what you've just tasted. By simplifying it that way, many people who I've worked with have found it easy to go into those more complex attributes and perhaps even narrow it down more. And what they're doing then is developing a way to understand and talk about the coffee even more easily using the wheel. I hope now you can see the wheel really becomes a culmination of much of what we've covered in earlier Cold Brew Labs. We've talked about origin. Where does origin play flavor-wise, flavor attribute-wise in the wheel? We've talked about brewing and what you can achieve by brewing. Remember we talked cold brew, hot brew, and what you get from cold brew? Well, you can find those attributes in the wheel. And so there's a link between everything that we've talked about. And that's our hope with the Cold Brew Lab. So now you have a vocabulary, a way to talk about coffee. You have a method to taste coffee that is a little bit more specific to attributes that are professionally known about coffees that'll help you talk about coffee. And you have an understanding of Cumulus and all that we do to create incredible cold coffee experiences. I'm gonna have one more sip. Ritual medium, sweet, a little bit nutty. You have a better understanding of what I'm talking about when I say that. In our next episode, we're gonna look at roasting. I'm Major Cohen, and this has been the Cold Brew Lab.